Imagine sitting in a cozy, warmly lit restaurant in the heart of New Delhi in India. Outside, the chaotic hum of the streets fades, replaced by a different kind of energy, the rhythmic clinking of cutlery, soft chatter, and the irresistible aroma of Indian spices. In the air, there's a rich, tantalizing scent: cumin, coriander, and cardamom, each spice blending together to create an aroma that pulls you in. Your mouth starts to water, and all you can think about is taking that first bite. Now, this is just a glimpse of what Indian cuisine is all about. But it's not just a meal, it's an experience that's traveled across the globe. From the bustling markets of Mumbai to fine dining restaurants in New York to street food stalls in London, you'll find its influence everywhere. But here's the thing. Indian food isn't just about flavor. It's about history. It's about tradition. These recipes have been passed down through generations. Each one carries stories of ancient customs, cultural celebrations, and the rich diversity of India's regions. And at the heart of many of these stories is the Tandoor oven. The tandoori technique is ancient and has been perfected over centuries. In a cylindrical clay oven called the tandoor, marinated meats are skewered and cooked over an open flame, absorbing intense heat from the charcoal below. The result? Cooked meat that seals in juices, leaving the inside tender and bursting with flavor. Dishes like tandoori chicken, paneer, and naan owe their smoky perfection to this method. But on one evening in 1995, at the open-air Bagiya Restaurant in Ashok Yatri Nivas, right in the heart of bustling Delhi, something was different. The tandoor oven in the restaurant carried a scent that wasn't quite right. It was faint at first, almost blending with the usual aromas of spices and charred meats. But there was something off about it, something that stirred an unease in the air. Patrons may not have noticed immediately, as the usual clatter and chatter of the restaurant filled the night. But the oven, a centerpiece of the kitchen, was holding more than just tonight's meal. Something was amiss, and while no one could have grasped it at that moment, the chilling truth of what the oven concealed would haunt New Delhi long after the night was over. You're listening to Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, brought to you by One Up Media. This episode may contain sensitive details and graphic imagery. Listener discretion is advised. It was July 2nd, 1995, and the night seemed like any other. A police officer named Constable Abdul Nazir Kunju and his partner, Home Guard Chandar Pal, were patrolling the quiet streets of Ashoka Road in New Delhi when they heard a woman scream about a fire. They stopped in their tracks, the hair on the back of their necks standing up. Without hesitation, they sprinted toward the source, and soon they reached a hotel where thick, dark smoke curled up from the open-air restaurant below. The familiar hum of the evening was gone, replaced by the suffocating stench of burning. The restaurant was named Bagiya, and at this hour, it was supposed to be closed. But tonight, it was obvious that something was terribly wrong. The officers searched frantically for an entrance, their eyes darting across the dimly lit exterior of the building. They could feel the urgency rising with each passing second, the smoke growing thicker and more unsettling. Just as they finally spotted a way inside, a figure stepped out from the shadows. His face was tight with tension, his movements hurried. It was the hotel's security guard. Constable Kunju wasted no time, his voice firm but laced with concern. "Why is there so much smoke coming out of the Bagiya restaurant?" The guard hesitated, shifting nervously before responding. "We are burning old election posters." He forced a strained smile, trying to mask the unease in his voice. "Don't worry, it will be done soon," he said, as though his words alone could dispel the thick, ominous smoke lingering in the air. Constable Kunju eyed the guard for a moment, his instincts tugging at him, but he nodded anyway. "Be careful," he warned, before turning away, allowing himself to leave, for now. However, as he walked away, the uneasiness gnawed at him. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the smoke. It was the way the guard had spoken, the nervous energy in his eyes. His instincts would prove right. He would return, and what he would find would be far worse than he could have imagined. In the 1970s and 1980s, India's political landscape was anything but calm. It was a time of turbulence, transformation, and figures who would leave an indelible mark on the country. Though decades had passed since gaining independence, India still grappled with deep socioeconomic challenges and political instability. Leading the charge during this era was Indira Gandhi, and her leadership of the Indian National Congress was as influential as it was controversial. In the early 1970s, Gandhi introduced bold populist measures, nationalizing banks, abolishing princely pensions, and with these moves, she won the hearts of India's rural poor. But in 1975, everything changed. That year, Gandhi declared the emergency. It was a moment that sent shockwaves across the nation. For 21 months, civil liberties were suspended. The press, censored. Opposition leaders, jailed. And India was now under authoritarian rule. What followed was a time of widespread civil unrest, some of the most intense the country had ever seen. The Congress Party, once seemingly unshakable, suffered a shocking defeat in the 1977 elections. But Gandhi wasn't done. In a dramatic comeback, she reclaimed power, ushering in a period marked by both political fervor and instability. During these years, India saw the rise of regional parties, and the Congress Party itself began to splinter. The political landscape shifted, making way for coalition politics. In other words, smaller political groups called regional parties started to become more popular, while the Congress Party, which had once been the most powerful, began to lose its strength. Because no single party had enough support to lead on its own anymore, different parties had to team up and work together to run the government. This is called a coalition, and it completely changed how politics worked in the country. Amid this chaos, many young, ambitious students were drawn into the political fray. University campuses started to become breeding grounds for political activism as youth movements began to challenge the status quo. By the 1980s, student wings of major political parties were flourishing, full of passionate and ambitious young people eager to take on India's deepest issues and reshape its democratic future. One of these rising stars was a man named Sushil Sharma. Sushil Sharma was known as an ambitious man who had long wanted to be part of India's political scene. His rise in Delhi politics was as swift as it was controversial. Born into a lower middle-class family, his father, a bank clerk who rose to become deputy manager, instilled in him a sense of ambition that would shape his political journey. In the late 1970s, he made his first entry into India's turbulent political arena. At that time, the Congress Party underwent dramatic shifts. As senior leaders resigned, fiery young figures, including Sushil, began to carve out their own space. It was on the campus of Delhi University's Satyawadi College that Sushil first made his mark, earning the nickname Chakumar for his aggressive tactics, often slashing posters of his rivals. He soon became a notorious figure in the university, marked by an arrogance that only grew with time. He carried a licensed revolver, reportedly abducted political opponents, and even attacked a deputy commissioner of police. An act that would lead him to a string of legal battles. Then, in 1989, Sushil's relentless ambition finally paid off when his connections earned him the role of president of the Delhi Pradesh Youth Congress. Sushil quickly established himself as a rising star, gaining favor with key political figures in India. His influence also began to spread into other areas, securing lucrative business deals and growing his personal empire. and in one of his business deals was the acquisition of a restaurant called Bagiya, nestled on Ashoka Road. In 1989, Sushil Sharma crossed paths with a woman named Naina Sahni. Both were ambitious young leaders within the Indian Youth Congress. Sushil, a rising star with a promising future, and Naina, a confident, outspoken woman already making waves as the All India Girls convener of the National Students' Union of India. According to the records, Sushil was drawn to Naina, not only by her beauty, but by the confidence and grace she exuded in every situation. Each interaction between them seemed to deepen his fascination as he became increasingly captivated by her charm, intelligence, and independence. Over time, his admiration grew, and it soon became evident that he was determined to win her over. Sushil began to court her with small, thoughtful gestures, gradually finding his way into her heart. Before long, their connection grew, and they became a couple. But before Sushil, Naina had actually been romantically involved with a fellow Congress worker named Matloop Karim. However, due to religious differences and family pressures, their relationship couldn't continue. But they parted on good terms and remained friends. By 1993, the bond between Sushil and Naina had solidified, leading to their marriage. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect political power couple, driven, successful, and united in both personal and professional ambitions. But behind closed doors, cracks were already beginning to form in their relationship. Cracks that would quickly widen into gaping holes. It was the evening of July 2nd, 1995, marking 2 years of marriage. Sushil Sharma made his way to the couple's flat in Gol Market. His steps were slow, deliberate, with the faint smell of alcohol clinging to him like a shadow. The apartment was quiet, only the faint murmur coming from the next room. It was Naina's voice, hushed, tense, and urgent. She was on the phone. The moment Sushil stepped inside, Naina quickly ended the call, placing the phone back on its cradle with nervous energy. But it was too late. Sushil had already seen her. The quickness of her actions, the secrecy in her tone, it all sent a chill down his spine. Something wasn't right, and as the tension settled in the room, Sushil's mind began to race. Naina, trying to keep up appearances, acted as if nothing was amiss. She casually sipped her drink and even offered one to Sushil, despite him already being noticeably under the influence of alcohol. But Sushil wasn't fooled. He had a strong suspicion about who she had been talking to. Without saying a word, he walked over to the phone, his movements deliberate. He lifted the receiver and, with a cold certainty, pressed the redial button. When a familiar voice came through on the other end, Sushil remained silent, but fury surged within him. The voice was unmistakable. It was Karim, Naina's former lover. Immediately, every suspicion he had buried deep within him came rushing back with brutal clarity. His mind raced, replaying every glance, every hushed conversation, every moment of doubt. He was certain now, Naina had been having an affair with Karim. The thought consumed him, and a raw, searing jealousy ignited inside, spreading like wildfire through his veins. His eyes locked onto Naina, who stood just feet away, oblivious to the storm she had unleashed. He turned to her, trembling with rage, and what began as a confrontation over the phone call rapidly spiraled into something far more intense. Words were exchanged, voices raised, accusations thrown like daggers. The air between them crackled with anger and betrayal. But this wasn't just an argument. Sushil's fury had crossed a line, a dark, irreversible threshold. In the heat of the moment, the argument took a chilling and horrific turn. One that would ultimately end in the flames of a Tandoor oven. As their argument intensified, buried tensions and unresolved issues quickly rose to the surface. Turns out, Naina had been quietly planning to leave Sushil, with hopes of relocating to Australia. Her intentions went beyond mere separation. She was aiming to build a completely new life, one free from the constraints of their troubled relationship. This struck a nerve in Sushil, and although records can't confirm if Naina had intended to move to Australia with Karim, Sushil likely assumed that was the case. Their confrontations had become more frequent in recent months, fueled by Sushil's suspicions of her alleged affair with Karim. But it wasn't just the thought of infidelity that enraged him. Her decision to leave him and go abroad added another explosive layer to their disputes. To Sushil, Naina's plans were a profound betrayal, threatening not only his control over her, but in his mind, his entire reputation. In that moment, their voices clashed, each one pressing the other further, but it was Sushil who was finally pushed beyond his breaking point. Naina's defiance, her refusal to back down, and her ability to turn his accusations back on him, it was more than he could bear.
Look at me when I talk to you!
Sushil's hand trembled as he glared at her, his face flushed with rage. She had crossed the line. Suddenly, a piercing sound cracked through the night, shattering the tension like glass. A heavy silence quickly blanketed the room, and Sushil stood there, stunned, barely able to grasp what he had just done. He stared at her, chest heaving, then quickly turned away, forcing himself to move, to push through the fog in his mind. But as he turned away, his eyes caught the faint outline of Naina's body on the ground. At that moment, Sushil realized what needed to be done. No one could ever know the truth. This would be a secret he was prepared to carry to his grave. The night had been a blur of anger and raw emotion, and Sushil Sharma could feel the weight of it pressing on his chest as he drove through the empty streets of Delhi. The city, usually brimming with life, felt unnaturally quiet. Each turn he made seemed both familiar and foreign, as if he were navigating through a dream, a nightmare that had unfolded too quickly to control. Sushil's grip tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white, as he struggled to calm the storm in his mind. Beside him, silence filled the car, thick and suffocating, and in the back seat, hidden beneath a heavy bedsheet, was the body of his wife, Naina Sahni. He didn't dare glance back, but her presence felt inescapable. Her last words echoed in his mind, accusations mixed with her threat to leave him for the one man he despised above all, her former lover, Matloop Karim. It was in that heated moment, in that flash of betrayal, that Sushil had reached a point of no return. She had defied him, pushed him beyond his limit, and now, there was no going back. Each mile brought him closer to his destination, to the place where he knew he could rid himself of the remains of this irreversible act. According to the records, the heated argument between Sushil and Naina took a sudden, deadly turn when Sushil reached into a nearby drawer and took a revolver. With intense anger clouding his judgment, he shot her 3 times at point-blank range. The first bullet struck her head, the second her neck, and the third missed, hitting an object behind her. Acting quickly, Sushil cleaned the scene, wiping away any signs of the struggle, before cautiously checking for any signs that the gunshots had drawn attention. Once he was satisfied that no one had noticed, he began to plot his next move, disposing of Naina's body. Initially, he planned to dump her body in the Yamuna River, a decision that led him to drive through the city, even passing by the Delhi police headquarters, with her body concealed in his car. But as he approached the river, the sight of a crowd forced him to rethink his plan. At that moment, another solution flashed through his mind, one that would keep his dark secret hidden. At least, so he thought. After driving for some time, he approached Ashoka Road, and right in front lay a direct path toward a Tandoor restaurant that was nestled inside the Ashok Yatri Niwas Hotel. It was once a place filled with shared memories, but tonight, it would serve a darker purpose, a place to erase her from his life completely. All he needed now was to stay focused, keep his resolve steady, and the tandoor oven would take care of the rest. As he parked outside the hotel, Sushil let out a slow, shallow breath, steadying himself for what lay ahead. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted the restaurant's owner, a dear friend named Keshav Kumar. When Sushil arrived and confided in him about the grave mistake he had made, Keshav acted without hesitation. In a quick, decisive move, he announced the restaurant's closure for the night. The decision was made with remarkable speed, almost as if Keshav didn't need to think it through. It was simply a favor he would do for his friend Sushil. No questions asked. It was around 11 p.m. when the two of them set to work. Together, they gathered pieces of wood, constructing a makeshift pyre around Naina's body. Keshav even provided packets of butter to help the flames burn more intensely. With a final grim determination, they lit the pyre, and the flames of the tandoor roared to life. It was reported that Naina's body had already been dismembered into smaller pieces to ensure it would burn more easily. However, it remains unclear whether Sushil had performed this brutal act at home or if it took place here, in the restaurant. Either way, the remains were now engulfed in the oven's flames, but it would take some time for the fire to erase every trace of what he had done. Hours later, the narrow alleys and roads around the restaurant were suddenly awash in the flashing red and blue lights of police cars, casting long, eerie shadows against its walls. Earlier that night, the intense blaze of the tandoor oven had caught the eye of a patrolling policeman who sensed something was wrong. When the officers arrived to investigate, they were met with a horrifying sight. The inside of the tandoor oven revealed the unmistakable outline of a burning body. The restaurant manager, Keshav, was apprehended on the spot, but Sushil Sharma managed to slip away just before additional officers arrived. Immediately, the area was overtaken by the hum of police radios and the hurried steps of forensic teams moving to examine the pieces left behind. With precision, officers took photographs, swabbed surfaces, and collected every scrap of evidence they could find. Several officers clustered around the tandoor oven, while others turned away, covering their faces from the stench that hung in the air, a sickening mix of burnt flesh and smoke. The remains were soon transported to the city morgue, but forensic experts encountered a significant challenge. The body was almost unrecognizable. The limbs had been distorted from the intense heat, and the skin was blackened and blistered. Identifying the victim seemed nearly impossible. Yet, despite this, there was still a glimmer of hope. Forensic teams immediately ran DNA tests, and what they discovered left them stunned. Cross-referencing the DNA profile with existing records, they confirmed that the remains belonged to 29-year-old Naina Sahni, the wife of Sushil Sharma, and a woman on the path to a promising political career. The implications were staggering. Naina was a well-known figure in the political circles of Delhi, but now she had been found brutally murdered in a restaurant that was linked to her husband Sushil. To verify the results, police first sought to contact Sushil, but since he had vanished without a trace, they reached out to a colleague and former lover, Matlub Karim. Grief-stricken and stunned, Karim arrived at the morgue and confirmed their findings. He immediately recognized her from the distinctive curve of her nose and the texture of her hair. For the following 9 days, the Delhi police launched an intensive manhunt for Sushil Sharma, who was finally apprehended when he surrendered in Bengaluru. Records say that once Sushil Sharma was brought back to Delhi, he began discussing the details of the murder and even allegedly implicated a high-ranking central minister and several other prominent figures in an apparent attempt to shift focus away from himself. At first, Sushil claimed he had been away on a pilgrimage, insisting he had no knowledge of the crime. He stated that his travels had taken him to a temple in Ajmer, followed by stops in Jaipur and then Bombay during that period. However, Sushil's story quickly broke down. When the police pressed him for details, specifically asking which temple he had visited in Ajmer, Sushil hesitated. He was unable to name the temple, but quickly offered a feeble excuse, claiming it was too late at night for him to remember its name. Then he abandoned the pilgrimage explanation and later accused his political rival, Maninderjit Singh Bitta, of orchestrating a political conspiracy against him. According to local news reports at the time, a police official commented on Sushil's tactics, saying, "He'll be weaving a lot of stories in the days ahead, aiming to confuse us or shift the charge from murder to manslaughter." This case stood out as one of the most extraordinary murder investigations in the country at the time. It wasn't typical. It required not one but two autopsies to determine the exact cause of Naina Sahni's death. Surprisingly, each report led to conflicting conclusions, adding more layers of complexity to an already shocking case. According to local news reports, the initial autopsy determined that Naina had died due to excessive bleeding and suggested she may have been unconscious during dismemberment. However, this report couldn't confirm if the dismemberment occurred before or after her death, leaving a crucial question unanswered. In a stark contradiction, the second autopsy entirely dismissed the findings of the first. One of the forensic experts revealed evidence of 2 gunshot wounds, one to the skull and one to the neck. Additionally, police evidence also revealed a .32 caliber shell found in Sushil's apartment, along with a revolver registered in his name. With the revelations from the second autopsy, the investigation took a dramatic turn, bringing the truth to light. Sushil Sharma had indeed shot his wife, Naina, at point-blank range, killing her instantly. Afterward, he dismembered her body and transported the remains to the Tandoor restaurant. Once there, he, along with manager Keshav, set the remains on fire in the tandoor oven, hoping the flames would erase all evidence and keep their secret buried forever. But all secrets will eventually come to light one way or another, and someone would soon have to pay the price. In this case, it would be capital punishment for Sushil. On the 27th of July, 1995, the Delhi police filed a charge sheet with the Sessions Court. And years later, on November 7, 2003, the court handed down its judgment. Sushil Sharma was sentenced to death, while Keshav Kumar, the restaurant manager, received 7 years of rigorous imprisonment for his involvement. However, from behind the walls of prison, Sushil refused to accept his fate. Over the next few years, he filed multiple appeals, each one a desperate attempt to avoid death. Eventually, in 2013, the Supreme Court commuted Sushil's death sentence to life imprisonment, citing that this decision was influenced by his lack of a prior criminal record. The court noted that his actions stemmed from a personal dispute rather than being a crime directed against society as a whole. Then, in December of 2018, after nearly 23 years behind bars, Sushil was granted release on the grounds of good behavior. Upon release, he expressed regret over his actions, cautioning others against making any impulsive decisions. Telling the media, he says, "I regret what I did and wish to advise others against making spur-of-the-moment choices. My life is a clean slate now, and I have to relearn everything from scratch." Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, is brought to you by One Up Media. This episode was produced and written by Guangjin, edited by Alex, audio experience by Ethan Sam. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.